Hey guys, and welcome to the next episode in the ROTJ build videos. We're going to be working on the legs in this video. So both legs are built exactly the same way, they're just mirrored. So this is the first leg that I built off camera so you can see how it goes together and what it looks like finished. And we're going to build one of the legs here on camera so you can see the exact process of how it goes together. We can see the really interesting assembly process is that there's really no glue except for two parts on this entire leg. It's just really awesome how the assembly process works for this leg. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to build this in small modules, and we're going to get started with the top portion of the leg. So I'm going to set this to the side, and let's go ahead and grab the parts that we're going to need to build the top part of the leg. You're going to need your NO bag, your J bag, these parts, and a pile of snap rings. For tools, I'll let you know as we go along, but you will need your snap ring tool, and you will need your Allen key set. So let's get started with this piece here. So the first thing we're going to want to put on is this collar. So we're going to take this collar, and this fits right over, and then it can't go any farther when it gets to the back. What we're going to want to do is we're going to want to put little set screws from the NO bag into all four of these holes. We're going to want to line up the first hole with the main hole on our axle. That way everything is 100% perpendicular, and you can see that there's a groove right here. The set screws just go into that groove and lock this collar in place. So let's go ahead and grab our little set screws, and then we're going to grab the appropriate Allen key, and that is going to be the H.9. And then we'll start at the top. So we're going to screw this in most of the way. And then I'm just going to look at this from the end. And then I'm going to look at this from the top and make sure that I have it nice and aligned. And then grab my Allen key and just finger tighten that. Then we're going to flip it to the opposite side, and we're just going to continue this process, just doing opposite set screws. Okay, so that's what it's going to look like when it's all finished. Everything's nice and perpendicular to each other, locked in, that ring does not rotate, you're good to go. Next step, we're going to grab one of our snap rings. This is the hardest snap ring to put in, so just give yourself some patience. We're going to grab our snap ring tool, try to put it on the end, and you might have to give this a couple of goes because it might pop out. But we're going to put this on the second snap ring indentation. So stretch it out, pop it on, let it go, on you go. And that faces down or just opposite, in line with the hole. Okay, so now we've got our piece with the snap ring. So we're going to grab our main thigh piece, and we're just going to slide this in here. You can see that it can't go any farther because we've got our snap ring in place. So now we're going to insert our next snap ring onto its groove. So let's go ahead, grab another snap ring. We're just going to do the exact same thing all over again. So I go very slowly when I'm opening up these snap rings, and that helps to keep them from jumping around. Okay, so it's in there, it ain't coming off. Voila. Next step, you're going to grab this guy. He's going to go in here. And you've got a snap ring that goes on the inside of this. These snap rings are hidden once you put your plastic piece on. That's why we're dealing with them first. So let's go ahead and put our snap ring on this side. Good, now this is in place. So we want to make sure that our snap rings are facing downwards. So that's an important part of this installation process. Next, we're going to grab our piece of plastic. And we're going to put this over the top. We're going to line it up, and then we're going to grab our bag of body mount screws. Let's go ahead and pour out some body mount screws. We're going to be using a lot of these in this module. So you can set your snap ring stuff to the side. Let's find our body mount, which is a 1.5. We're going to go ahead and start from the center and work our way outwards. So I'm screwing these in about halfway, and then I'll tighten them up. And this just gives us the ability to make sure that if there's any shrinkage on the plastic, that the screws have enough wiggle room to compensate. With anything that's handmade, there might be some slight variance where the holes line up to the taps on the screw holes. So this covers that. And luckily the plastic, of course, is flexible and it will give. So now starting with this piece, we're just going to tighten this up. And we'll tighten that up. Okay, so now you've got your first piece of plastic in place. Now our first little bit of gluing is going to be this guy. So you've got two of these in your package. The way to be able to tell the difference between the right leg and the left leg is if you turn this over, you've got this little tab right here. Now we wrote down right and left so that we would always remember, but you've got this little tiny tab, and if you're looking at them and you face them both like this, that little tab faces downward, and that's going to designate a right-hand side versus a left-hand side. So go ahead and grab both of them, hold them this way, and the little tab should face outwards to the left and to the right, and then go ahead and write down what you see. So this is going to be your right-hand side, and the other one's going to be your left-hand side. So just screen grab this. This is your right, and the other one's your left. Now to be able to put this on, all we're going to do is make a nice little line of glue on the large flat portion. And then we're going to keep that tab facing downwards. Then we're going to rotate it. It doesn't stick. And we're rotating the tab until it touches this main piece right here, and then just pressing it. So when you look at it, you can see that this square is slightly turned this way. So press, rotate clockwise until that little cutout tab presses up against this shape here. And that's going to lock you in place. Now we're going to grab this guy, grab some glue. We're going to put some glue around the border of the block. We're going to put a drop of glue right here. And then we're going to put a liberal amount of glue in the center. And this faces upwards. And then I'm pressing downwards to make sure that there's no gap. And that's that. Okay? Now if we flip this back over, we've got a couple of screws to add and we've got our shield to add. So if we go into J, we're going to grab 2 long screws from J. These are our axle tightening screws. So this is what locks your armature into position once you have it fully posed. So we're going to grab 2 of those screws. One of them is going to go here. And we're going to use I think this is a 2.5. Let me just double check. No, it's a 2. We're going to use a 2. And as soon as we feel pressure, we stop. This just allows for the posing to still happen right now because you're not wanting to lock anything down. And you're going to do the same thing to the back. As soon as you feel pressure, stop. And then the last piece that you can put on, and you can put this on for just for kicks, the right hand shield has this little detail on it. The left hand shield has no detail here at the bottom. That's how you tell the difference. So we're just going to grab 1 body mount screw, if I can hold on to it. And that is going to go in the second hole. So you can see this is the through hole for this screw. We're going to put the shield in this bottom hole here. And then you can just straighten that up. Now for painting, you're going to definitely want to remove that. But there you go. There's one thigh. So module 1 for this leg is complete. So let's go ahead and move on to the next module. So we're going to move these bags out of the way for now. Keep your body mount screws. We're going to be using those. So let's grab our H bag, our M bag. We're going to need this piece, this piece, this piece. We need these 2 plastic pieces. We need these little guys. They're mirrored. So just make sure that you have a pair. You need 2 of these. They're all the same, so just grab 2 of them. You need 1 of these little silver coupling or collars. You need 1 brass tube. And then you're going to need 1 of each of these. So one has an open hole, one has a closed hole, and you can see that they are mirrored. So make sure you've got a set of those. So for the installation, you're going to start with this guy. So you're going to make sure that you line it up like this. The right hand angle is pointed towards you. This notch is pointed away from you. Then you're going to want to make sure that the screw portion, this is for the right leg, is facing downwards. That's going to go here. Then this portion sits on top of it. And then we're just going to flip this around. That makes a right hand leg. We're going to grab our H bag. We're going to drop these little screws in here. We're not going to tighten them all the way. So as soon as you feel pressure, go ahead and stop. Now we're going to go ahead and check for any type of give and just make sure that everything's lined up. At this point, let's go ahead and grab our big flathead screw from M. And this is going to help ensure that everything's lined up. M always is on the inside of the model. So on your right leg, when you're looking at it, this is on the right side. You can see that the screw is on the inside portion. So if I grabbed my left leg, you can see it's like this, where we've got our flathead screws facing towards the inside. And then these screws face towards the outside. So that's how your alignment is supposed to look. So now that everything's aligned and you make sure that this portion here is parallel, let's go ahead and tighten up these screws. Okay. Now we're going to grab these guys. So for the outside portion, you're going to use the closed hole. And we're just going to grab 2 body mounts. And get that tightened down. Now, one thing we noticed on our pieces was that the end of these had a slight warp towards the upward portion, so they bent a little bit upwards like this. If you notice that, just take a heat gun or a hair dryer, and you can put this on a flat surface and heat it up, and then while it's hot, you can just bend it slightly to where it's the opposite direction, and then blow on it, and that will form the opposite curve. Then when it gets pressed with the screws, it'll flatten out and you're not going to have this wanting to pull away from the metal surface. It's really simple to do with this plastic. So just be aware that if you notice any type of bending or warping that is very common for flat plastic pieces, it's almost impossible because the plastic is heated when it's cast. That casting process creates a lot of heat, and when it cools, it wants to constrict. So sometimes the thin pieces want to bend a little bit, but you can get rid of that bend very easily with heat. So we've got these 2 pieces installed. Let's go ahead and add these 2 covers. That's next. Now we noticed on our model that these 2 covers, this is the one part of the model that seems to have the biggest difference in where the screw holes are lining up. So this hole lines up really nicely. This hole does not line up very well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a round file and I'm just going to file this top hole to be slightly elongated. And that's just going to give me a little bit more access to the hole. I do not need a tremendous amount of access. I need just a little bit. I need to be able to access the hole about halfway to make it flex in the right direction. So do not overdo it. Otherwise you'll see a gap. So I'll show you what this looks like. So we can go ahead and try it here now. So this one might be just a little bit harder to put in, so I'm just gonna screw that on just like that. And that one screws on perfectly. No mess, no fuss. So yeah, it's just a little bit off. You're gonna have to do the same thing to this side. So just be aware of that, and that happens on both legs, unfortunately. I think this part must have shrunk just a little bit more. Okay, so we've got both of those on. Everything looks good. If you see a little bit of a rim here, you could take a little bit of plastic putty and fill that in if you want to, but I'm sure that that type of stuff existed on the real one, so you could call that authenticness if you wanted to as well. All right, moving on, we've got the last little bit of gluing to do on this piece. So we've got these little guys. So you can see that there's pretty much only one way that they go on. So we're just going to go ahead and glue these guys on. Just putting a little bit of glue in the center. All right, so those two are on. Now on the back side, what we're going to be making is a little roller for our spring steel to slide under. This is that tendon that goes on the back of the leg. So what we have to do is we've got to put our brass piece and float it in here, and then we're going to put a collar inside there. So it's going to be very similar to this. That's kind of what it's going to look like. So what you want to do is you want to put this on and test fit it so that you can gauge where the brass needs to be glued inside these pieces, because the brass is not the exact length of both pieces, both plastic parts. So you can see it's about a millimeter inside each one. That's kind of how it looks. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take one piece and I'm going to put glue around in a circle. And then I'm going to give myself that 1 millimeter. You can see you actually have a pretty decent amount of working time. Then I'm going to install it. Get it exactly where I want it. Then I'm going to take some accelerant, give it a good squirt. That's going to lock in that one side. Now we can put our collar on. And now we're going to fill up the other side. Go ahead and clean up our glue. That might help. And then there might still be a little bit of accelerant on that side. So I moved a little bit quickly. You might want to wait a little bit because it started to solidify pretty fast. So if you want to wait until this evaporates or cleans off before putting some glue on the other side, that might be wise because mine's already solidified. Just a little warning there. And then you just got to press it into place. And that's it. Now this unit is ready to go. So let's go ahead and set this guy off to the side. Now you're going to need this piece. You need 2 of these guys, and they're mirrored. So you need to make sure you got 2 of these. You need a disc. Looks like this. You need this. You need this guy. You're going to need your I bag. And you're going to need your H bag. And before I forget, one part that we did miss off of this guy is in the J bag. You do have an armature locking screw. And we don't want to forget that guy. So out of our J bag, let's go ahead and put our armature screw. And again, just finger tight. There you go. So now we'll set it off to the side. Okay. So you've got this piece here. So we're going to start with these two little pieces. They're going to get screwed on with tiny body mount screws, which is H. You should have 4 of those inside your bag. And H is going to be screwed in with still the 1.5. So if you were to just screw these in without glue, there is a tendency for these to want to rotate. Now they won't rotate if you don't touch them, but they could. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take a single drop of glue, just a tiny drop of glue, and we're going to put that right here. So now we're going to put another drop of glue here. And just get that tight. And then what you can do, you've got a few seconds to just make sure that when you're looking at it through the crack, that they're both lined up and that you're nice and parallel down here. And that's really all you're looking for. So we've got that. Now we're going to go with our eye bag, which is the Go Motion and Shin. So this is our Shin. We're going to take an eye screw, and we're going to go ahead and tighten that. So that goes in there. Then we're going to grab our really unique screws. So this one has this little nipple piece that sticks out. So the next step is we're going to take this disc and we're going to put this in here. And we're going to take our screw with the nipple and we're going to put this, we're going to just thread this through. And it's going to act as an axle. So just line it up to where it threads in and is nice and even. And you could even put some Loctite on the end of this so that it doesn't move, or you could use a little bit of glue. We're going to leave it normal for now, and we'll decide what we want to do later on, but that's completely up to you. It will stay where it's at, but if you wanted to solidify it, you could solidify it. And now we've got our little tiny piece here. And inside of your eye bag, there are some very tiny button head screws. You should see 2 of them. So we're going to grab one, and that is going to be what holds our steel in place. So we're going to switch back to, I believe this is our, yeah, we're using the Torx, the T5 for this guy. And on the back of your axle, your disc, you've got a hole. So go ahead and grab now you can see it. And we can give that one a good tight, nice and tight. Okay. All right, so we've got this piece done. So now let's go ahead and install all 3 pieces together to make the leg. So let's go ahead and grab this guy right here. So this piece is going to go inside here. So the first thing we need to do is remove our flathead screw. So you can do that with a flathead screwdriver or your finger, depending upon how tight you had it. Then we're going to insert this piece and then drop our flathead back in. And I'm going to grab a flathead screwdriver just to make this process faster. Bring it back in here, tighten it up. Then we're going to crank this backwards. And then we're just going to slide our spring steel in. You can see that makes just a beautiful curve for the tendon. And then there's your, so this is the outside, this is the inside. Next, we've got our thigh. So this just attaches really nicely in here. And we might have to do some loosening. So when you're ready to do an official install, you're going to want to take one of your snap rings and put that on here, and that's going to lock it in place. I'm going to leave this snap ring off because for painting purposes, we're going to want to paint this part separately from this part. So in the meantime, you can just use this screw and this screw to hold these pieces into position. And that just keeps everything nice and tight. But you've got a right leg, and then once you do the reverse, you're going to have your left leg. So just repeat this process for the left leg, and there you go. Full piece. Nice and tidy. Okay, so on this part, we're going to build the feet, and then we're going to get the feet installed. So this is a complete foot without it being installed. And as you can see with the brass bar in place, there is no installation, but we can pop that back out. So these two set screws go into little grooves, and that's what holds that in place. What's really cool about the foot and what makes it very different than the ESB is that the foot is completely adjustable side to side. And the way that works is you've got this flat piece, it slides in here, and then that whole thing can rotate. And you can loosen or tighten that based upon two screws that are in the bottom. Now what I'm doing that you can choose to do or you don't have to do is I'm placing some double-sided tape here instead of gluing the actual foot pad to the metal part. And the reason why I'm doing that is this allows me to attach the actual metal part of the armature to the leg and then remove the foot for painting, for shipping, for any variety of things. And then I can just take this whole thing off and then put it back on whenever I want to. So that just makes my whole process easier. So let's go ahead and build a foot just like this. So as you can already see, the first step is going to be taking your foot, sliding that into the back of the ankle. Then you're going to flip this upside down. You're going to grab your B bag, and you're going to take two of these screws out. This is going to be the number 2. And we're just going to drop these in here. And we'll screw these in. So once you hit friction, I'm just going to tighten it up just a little bit. Tighten it up just a little bit. Now you should have motion, but it should take a decent amount of pressure to be able to make that rotation. So we're going to set that to the side. Now you've got your foot with 3 parts. when you attach your toe, which just goes on in here, to be able to get paint on the inside of this portion, once you put your collar on, it's going to be a little bit difficult to put paint on. So this is how the collar goes on. It's just simple glue, but you are probably going to want to leave that off for painting first to get your base color on. You don't have to leave it off for weathering, but you're going to want to leave it off to get your base coat on. So just understand, you're just going to use a little bit of super glue and you put it in the grooves, and it goes on really simple like that, but we're going to leave it off because once we put it on, it ain't coming off. For your toe, there is no spring with this one, so we're just going to use a level surface. We're going to grab our glue. We're going to put a little bit of glue in the trench, and we're going to put glue on the end. Then we're just going to put these up next to each other. Make sure everything's nice and straight and level. Then just grab some of our accelerator. Let that solidify. And there you go. Very simple. Now the last part of this is just installing your brass. So before we do that, let's go ahead and grab our R bag. We're going to grab 2 set screws out of the R bag. And we're just going to install these 2 set screws using our little Torx T5. So we're just going to get these about halfway installed. Just like that. Now, to be able to put this in and get this fully installed, let's go ahead and grab a leg. So it's going to go in here. You're going to want to make sure that your screw is loose here. So let's back this out a bit so there's no tightness. Then we're going to insert this and drop our pin. And just make sure that that's nice and flush. Then we're going to go back in here and we're going to tighten these up. Doesn't have to be very tight. Just get it nice and finger tight. Just like that. Now I'm just going to position this to where my main leg is vertically up and down. And then we'll tighten up our screw. Just like that. And then all you got to do is take your foot and it just sits on there, and you can just press on your double-sided tape, and then you'd pop your piece on. Oop, backwards. Backwards never works. And there you go. And again, this piece just pops off with the double-sided tape. When you're done, if you're never going to move it, you can take the double-sided tape off and you can glue it in place however you want to do it. This is just to help us with moving things around. But that's a foot. You're just going to repeat the process. Both feet are exactly the same. There's no difference in ambidextrous, so there's no right or left. And that's putting a foot together. So the next step is going to be putting together the top portion here, and then the whole leg assembly is going to be done. So let's move on to that next step. All right, for the last section on the legs, we've got our hips. So I've already put together the left hand hip, and each one of these hips are slightly different. So I'm going to go over the installed hip first, and then we'll do the right hip. So looking at your hip, the way that both of them are assembled, your two-hole portion, which is the portion that has the groove on it, goes forward or away from you if you're sitting at a table. So that's how they're oriented when you place them in front of you. Then, as far as which side goes up and which side goes down, you want the back portion, the top of the back portion to be unthreaded, the bottom to be threaded. You want the top of the front to be threaded and the bottom to be unthreaded. That way it looks like this, where the screw head of the front is at the bottom and the screw head of the back is at the top. So that is your orientation. And that's where we begin the process. The second part of the process is in your F bag, you have some more set screws. Those set screws are going to go into this section right here on both sides. You're going to tighten that up to the point where it is difficult for you to rotate this section of the hip. This is another very interesting part of the ROTJ versus the ESB, where you can actually rotate the legs inwards and outwards and then offset that with the feet to allow for very interesting posing movements. And that is not something that the ESB had. So it's a really cool feature. So you're going to want to put those set screws in first. Next on this is we are going to put the plastic covers over the top, but we're going to use two different types of glue. We've got our regular super glue, or you can use the Gorilla Clear glue depending upon which you prefer. But we're also going to use a glue called Tack It, which is a temporary, or not really temporary, it's like more like a permanent kind of like double adhesive tape type glue. And that is the glue that we're going to use to put these plastic pieces over the portion that has the set screw. The reason why we're doing that is we want to be able to remove that plastic part if you need to loosen or tighten that set screw in case your posing is too tight or too loose. If you were to use super glue or the clear glue, while you can technically remove the clear glue, it is going to be very difficult to do so, and you could potentially break your plastic. It is just not extremely wise to do so. And then if you use super glue, of course, it'll be a permanent bond, while brittle, again, very difficult to remove, and you want this to be easily adjustable. So the Tack It creates that double adhesive tape type bond, allowing you to remove it. Next, let's start with the left-hand side. So while this is facing in the upward position, which is the way that we've got it right now, you can see that the orientation of these panels is with the angles towards the outside. The back portion is super glued. The front portion is Tack It glued. If we rotate this, you're going to see that the long portion is now visible. And then if we rotate it again, you'll see that the angle is facing out and the angle is facing out. So the reason why they do this is so that if you were to rotate this a full 180 degrees, you still have both of these in the right orientation. So if we were to rotate this, again, rotating this 180 degrees, they still face outwards. They still face outwards, okay? So this is the top. Remember, screw head on the back faces up for the left-hand side. This is only for the left-hand side. Your angles are towards the outside. Then flip it over. Now the screw head is to the front. This is the bottom, and your angles are still facing to the outside. Now my glue is still wet. That's why it's adjustable. So just get yourself aligned, and then you're going to want to set this to the side and let this dry. It's going to take a couple hours for the Tack It glue to dry and become double-sided adhesive, okay? So we're going to move this and set this to the side. Now, for this portion, let's go ahead and start the installation process with the set screws. We are using our T5. That's just barely finger tight to begin with. And then we're going to tighten this a very decent amount before installing anything. So I'm going to give this a full 3/4 turn. And that was about a 1/2 turn. And now that is quite difficult to move, which is exactly how I want it. Now, let's grab our large screws, which is the KL bag. I'm going to grab 2 of the big screws out of that. And remember from the other portion that your back has the screw at the top. Your front has the screw at the bottom. Easy to rotate, remember? There you go. So now you've got your orientation correct. Now, on these pieces here, we noticed that the pins, the little pins that go inside these little recessed areas, are about a 1/2 millimeter to a 1/4 millimeter too long. So go ahead and grab some little snips, and you're just going to cut off the head. That's all you've got to do. So just cut off all the heads. Once your pins are cut, let's go ahead and do the back portion, which is the slightly easier way with our super glue. We're going to choose a part that allows for the angle to face outwards. Let's grab this from the side so we can feel it with our fingers. And we're just going to get this aligned and then press it flat. Then if you rotate this on its side, this next one is also going to be super glued, and it should have exactly the same parallel design. And this is different than the way that the other one is oriented. I don't know why they did it, but this is what the research showed. So it is not the same as the other side. So again, we'll orient this, glue it in place. So when you look at it from top down, the angles are the same. So this is the top, faces out. If you rotate it all the way around, faces in. It's weird, but that's the way it works. Now all we have to do is just match that with this side, and we're going to pull out our tack-it glue. So a little bit of tack-it glue. Put that in place. We're going to press. I'm going to grab a throwaway brush. Wipe it down each side. And then I'm just wiping that off on a paper towel. Then we're going to put this on its side. Go ahead and do the same thing. And then we're just going to apply this the exact same way. Flip it over. Press it nice and flat. Get it aligned. Try to keep your fingers off of it. This will dry clear, but of course it'll be sticky. Okay. Now you're aligned. So you've got your 2 pieces, just like this. And those are the hips. Now, we could install the hips right now, but we want to let all this tack-it glue dry. So we're going to let this dry.